Hello, Year 7. This lesson is about diffusion. And if you imagine that you have a perfume and you spray it in one corner of the room, then if you look at the first picture there that you have, picture number one, at the start, in picture number one, the blue particles are there to represent the perfume particles, and they are now added to the room with the red particles that are the gas particles or the air particles. And at the moment, as you see in that picture, they are not mixed at all. In picture two, the blue particles begin to mix with the red ones. Okay. In picture three, the blue particles or the perfume particles start to spread out and bump into each other. And this helps them to keep spreading further and further out. By the time we get to picture four, the particles eventually become completely mixed, and we say a process of diffusion is completed. Now, particles here, they move randomly. That means that they can move in all sorts of directions, and we can't always predict where they're going to move. It can happen randomly. But the overall movement of those perfume particles is from an area where they were what we call highly concentrated, or where there were many of them, and they gradually moved to the area in that box where they were low in concentration, or there weren't many of them. Okay. So what do we mean by diffusion? How can we then define diffusion? So thinking about that perfume that was sprayed in one corner of the room, diffusion is the spreading out of particles, for example, the perfume particles, of any substance in what we call a solution or a gas, resulting in what we call a net movement. Net just means overall, an overall movement from an area of what we call high concentration to an area of lower concentration. Okay, and there are some factors that can increase the diffusion or make the diffusion happen quicker. And if you increase the temperature, then the diffusion will happen faster. If there is a larger surface area available for diffusion to take place, then that will increase diffusion as well. And if there is a big difference in concentration between the two areas, then diffusion will increase as well. So what do we mean by this word concentration? Because we've just said that the diffusion happens from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. Well, let's take an example where we have some sugar. If we dissolve that sugar in water, we form what's called a solution. Okay, so water and sugar, that's a sugar solution. Okay, we call the sugar that is dissolved in the water, we call that the solute, and the thing that does the dissolving, which is the water in this case, we call it the solvent. Another example of a solution could be a salt solution, where the solute is the salt, and if it's water, then dissolved in water, then we can say that the water is the solvent, and so we have a salt solution. Now, concentration is just a measurement of how much solute is dissolved in a given volume of solvent. So in other words, for example, how much sugar is dissolved in a given amount of water. And if a solution contains a lot of dissolved solute, like in the picture on the right below, then we can say that it is highly concentrated. But if it contains just a little bit of solute, or just a little bit of salt, or a little bit of sugar, for example, then we say it is diluted. Okay, so it's a dilute solution. So how does diffusion work in living organisms? So if we imagine here that we have some sort of container, and we have a concentrated sugar solution. Let's taking a look at the container on the left. Initially, we have a lot of sugar molecules. Let's say it's glucose, which is the sugar molecule, a lot of red ones. So you've got a lot of red sugar molecules on the left-hand side of that diagram. And this permeable membrane is just some material that allows things to pass through. Okay, so in this case, what happens is because we've got a lot of high concentration of sugar on the left of the diagram, and the right of the diagram has less concentration of sugar, so it's fairly dilute, then the diffusion will take place from the higher concentration into the lower concentration. So the sugar molecules will diffuse mainly to the right. Okay, and this will keep on going and until we end up with the picture on the right hand side where we say that the distribution of water and sugar molecules is uniform, or we can say that they are evenly distributed, so the same number of sugar molecules are on the left as there are on the right hand side. So the diffusion will keep on happening until everything, all the sugar molecules are the same on both sides. Okay, so dissolved substances such as glucose and gases such as oxygen and carbon dioxide move in and out of cells by diffusion. So here we imagine that this little circle here is a cell of an animal, let's say. So oxygen molecules need to get into the cell. This will help in respiration. Food molecules also need to get into the cell for respiration to take place and release the energy that's required. So as you can see at the moment, there's a lot more oxygen molecules on the outside of the cell. So that means oxygen is higher concentration outside the cell and lower concentration inside the cell. So diffusion will happen from higher concentration to lower concentration. So the oxygen molecules will go into the cell. Food molecules are the same. There's a higher concentration of them outside the cell, so they will diffuse into the cell. Okay. On the other hand, what's produced after respiration are some waste products. One of those waste products is carbon dioxide, which is toxic to the cells. So this needs to be removed, and this can be done by diffusion as well, because there's a higher concentration of carbon dioxide molecules inside the cell. So diffusion will take place of the carbon dioxide molecules from inside the cell to the outside of the cell where there are initially less of them. So all cells in our body need glucose and oxygen for the process of respiration to take place, and that will release energy. And remember that respiration takes place in the mitochondria, one of the organelles or one of the parts of the cell. So just remember that the carbon dioxide is the waste product of respiration, and that passes out of the cell into the blood to then be removed from the body.